So I'll just be real brief here in the introduction. I've known Ryan for many years, going back to Mises Institute days. He had been so I was at Texas Tech as a research assistant professor. They have a PhD program there that we sometimes joke about, hey, to do this stuff, you don't need to get a PhD in Austrian economics. Well, he is getting a PhD in Austrian economics. He wasn't happy with the mainstream academia, even from an Austrian perspective, the way it was in the US, so he decided he wanted to do that. He was going to go and become a full-time IBC person. And then he tells me, also, he's going now and getting a PhD at the Universidad Francisco Marroquin, or UFM, where I'm overseeing that dissertation. It's real interesting stuff on Austrian capital theory, real path-breaking work, in my opinion. But beyond that, he's been doing a lot, making a lot of YouTube videos. So especially if you're younger and you want to use social media and how do I use all these new tools to get clients or whatever, he's certainly a person to talk to because he's relatively new, but he's obviously hitting the ground running. So without further ado, put your hands together for Ryan Griggs.
Takes us a little more. Oh, there we go. That sounds right. Okay. Okay. Here we go. I was born in California, but I'm from Texas, and we're fixing to go in on them. Okay. Is there anywhere I should avoid standing? Okay. All right. Just so I know who I'm talking with, how many people, show of hands, first time at a think tank? Wow. Oh, okay. More than I thought. All right. That's good to know. So my name's Ryan Griggs. Let's see. PhD student, like Bob mentioned, CEO, founder, Griggs Capital Strategies. Here's some of my information here. GriggsCapitalStrategies.com, medium.com/@RyanDGriggs. A number of you have approached me this week, these past 2 days, and mentioned the Medium blogs that I write, and I've heard a lot of business has gone in force, and it doesn't hurt to buy me a drink. That's all I'm saying. I could also give you a routing number, but a drink will be fine. No, but those are up there. I mean, I do that stuff because it's my own. I mean, that's what I would be doing anyway, right? I'm in a PhD program pursuing Austrian capital theory because that's what I'd be doing anyway. If you were here last year at the 2019 think tank, that was the subject of my talk, why Nelson is an heir to Menger. Right? Karl Menger is the founder of Austrian economics, and the point was to show that there is a deep intellectual history that Nelson's speaking from. Right? This isn't just another financial strategy. Right? This is applying Austrian economics at the individual level. And I think that advisors have a big opportunity to distinguish yourselves, from the conventional mindset by pointing that out. Right? Because if you go to look at American college where they get all their little fancy designations, I've seen some people, they got their name and then they have an alphabet soup of designations that fill the whole page. I'm like, you'll never be my client. It's just, it won't work, right? It won't work. Because you can go to American college, you can go to the website, you can look at the books that the individuals who go through those programs have to read. And I've talked to agents who say, I'm considering getting such and such designation, I'm thinking about that versus the practitioner program, what should I do? They tell me I know some Austrian economics, so I feel that I'm inoculated against what they teach. And I don't know how many people saw James Nethery speak earlier, but you can't get that stuff off of you, right? It sticks. And the people you spend, I have found in my experience that the people you spend time around, how they think becomes how you think. And whether it's intentional or not, right? But point being, you can look at those professors, you can look at the classes, you can look at the textbooks. Nelson himself used to talk about how when he went to get his CLU, he had to read Paul Samuelson's textbook. Paul Samuelson was a communist. He was a supporter of the Soviet Union. He was raving about it just before it collapsed. Okay? So my point is we have an opportunity, I think, that's why I spoke about it last year. That's why I've chosen to make capital theory the subject of my dissertation, is for that reason. I think there's a lot of work to be done. People ask, why isn't IBC more well known? Frankly, I think one of the reasons is we haven't done the work. We haven't laid out the financial theory from the economic perspective. There's a group of guys, University of Chicago, 1950s, a bunch of them won Nobel Prizes. They created financial economics. That financial economics theory became the mutual fund industry, right? The ideas came first. And so like my point last year, talking about how the Austrians have a certain view of capital nowadays that is very different than the view of capital that Menger and Mises had, we got to fix that so we can catch up. We're behind, my view, we're behind. And I understand it's not for everybody. It's not everybody's calling to go about doing that, and I get that. And that's one thing that I want to make sure to emphasize here. When David asked me whether I'd like to speak 2 weeks ago, I said, of course, yes. And you know what? We had a phone call. What do you want me to talk about? And he's like, well, we want the speakers to basically put together presentations that we can show a new mentee in 2020, next year, on into the future, right? What do they need to know? And I was like, okay, well, I want to talk about mentorship, right? So I went through the mentor program in October of 2017, quickly went through the coursework and completed the final exam, was paired with James Nethery after about 45 minutes. I mean, it was quick. Understand that Nelson had a lot to do with that. Very grateful for that. And we've had a really phenomenal relationship. And I think it is exceptional. But what I want to do here today is not tell you that you need to be like me or that you need to be like James. In fact, I hope that the takeaway, the implication is that I want you to do the opposite. I want you to do you, right? No one can do me as well as I do me. No one can do James as well as he does him. No one can do you as well as you do you, right? I think a lot of times in a sales-related industry, there's this and that program and this and that subscription-based training, whatnot, where they want you to be like them. Okay, I'm not here to tell anybody that they're right or I'm right or that they're wrong or that I'm right. It's not about that. I just don't agree with it, right? I think the better opportunity lies within you, right? So I have a couple agents that I now help and mentor, and we're talking about, okay, what name should I go by? What should be my doing business name? And well, it's like I want you to think about how you see what you do in this business that only you will do. What's that look like? That's where the name will come from, right? And I can't tell you what that is, right? I don't want to tell you what that is. So the subject of this presentation today will be mentorship. I'm going to kind of go behind the scenes a little bit with James and I, and I'm going to be very transparent with you. I'm going to tell you a few stories about how things work with us, but the point is to illustrate a more fundamental substructure. I have about 4 key things that I want to pull out and stress, and I think that they would apply. It's kind of like a meta structure. I think they would apply to anybody's context, right? So, there's a question about, well, if you're talking about mentorship, then maybe this is only for the mentees, or maybe this is only for the mentors. Now, I want to make the point that a mentor is an advisor, right? You can give the technical advice, right? But mentors are also models, right? Role models. There's a pastor I listen to sometimes, T.D. Jakes. He did a series recently called Model Homes. The reason they have a model home in a new building development is so that you can help people see what could be, right? And you might not want to replicate the model 100%. You might want to change the counters or the paint or this or that, but you start to get an idea of where you're going, right? That's not strictly mentoring, right? That's observing a model. And I don't know how many have thought of it this way, but it's like when Nelson used to say, the fish are the last to notice the water. We all have models. We all have mentors, whether we're intentional about it or not. The Nelson Nash Institute Practitioner Program is just an opportunity to be intentional about mentorship in this specific aspect of life, in my view, right? And I think so that, we're all either prospective mentees, current mentors, or prospective mentors. Everybody in here has a role model. For James, it was Nelson. Right? Now, since he's passed, for me, it's now James. Right? And for everybody in here, Nelson was our model. Right? So my point is that this is really for everybody. I hope it's for everybody. They put the slideshow together, or the video together last year, and I thought that, dang, they cut away from me a lot and show a lot of words. And so I just have pictures this time. So there you go, right? Okay, weird title. Why is it called what it's called? And, well, come on. How do you not name a talk after that? Listen, if you haven't been to Texas, you should go for this reason. But this is one of the things that, I'll come down. I live in Fort Worth. James lives in Alvarado, about 40 minutes south. I typically drive once or twice a week down, and we'll film Banking with Life, the podcast. How many people have seen Banking with Life? Just curious. Oh, wow. Okay. Wow. Cool. I hope it's helpful. After we do that, we go to this place called Hard 8. We go have barbecue, right? And continue talking. And so that's an element of what our mentorship, our relationship has come to look like. I don't know if anybody's UFC or mixed martial arts fans, but there was a big fight recently, Conor McGregor. You can notice my sock style here. And people pointed that out, and I'm not shy about it. I like my socks. But then I noticed that James's socks are a little boring, but they're also tiptoe socks. And by the way, there's still some headroom there. So he makes fun of me for being pasty white. I can make fun of him for being shorter. But my point with these pictures is to say this is what the principles that I'm going to talk about have manifested and what they look like for us. Yours is going to look totally different. All right, y'all Canadians, you have to trudge through snow just to leave your house. That'll look much different than this, right? But my point, I want to stress to you that a lot of the little stories as I go through these, the things I share, you might disagree with. And I don't know if you can sense my style, but I'm not shy. and it's okay. I want to say that it's okay that if you don't agree with everything. And I'm not saying that I'm right and you're wrong, right? I'm not. But I can't help in talking about our relationship and talking about mentorship in general without talking about our views on life insurance. And don't get me wrong, I'm not speaking for James, right? This is my stuff. This is what I've come to believe after 2.5, now 3, going on 3 years of mentorship under him and under Nelson, right? This is last year. They gave pins out when they did I thought they did, at least mine had one on it, but the little Nelson Nash Institute pins. This is not one of those, the one I'm wearing. This one came off of right there. And so my point here is that everything I share, my view on mentorship, my view on life insurance, I hope all adheres to what Nelson did. I think James said in his presentation, the further the conversation gets away from banking, the further off into the noise we go. And I totally agree. And there's a lot of it out there. And frankly, I'm okay with that because I'm sticking to Nelson. And when prospects or clients of people, I call them refugees, man from a war-torn country, they've had some sort of awful relationship, something went wrong, and they're looking for help from another advisor. It's like, I hear you, and I hear all the stories. 1090, he wants me to get a HELOC. Is a HELOC better than a mortgage? Yes, it's better than a mortgage. That's not the point, right? The point is, where do we want to build, and from where do we want to deploy capital throughout the course of our lifetime? Right? And there's reasons why, I went through them last year, there's reasons why dividend-paying whole life from a mutual insurance company is preferable to everything, right? We're solving a much bigger problem, right? We can get down into the weeds on this or that financial product, HELOC versus a mortgage. We're just going off into the noise. My view, my opinion. So everything I want to share today comes from, I hope, or it adheres to, or align with what Nelson would have talked about. Okay, so first thing. The idea of a minimally sufficient shared value set. Okay, I think a mentee, prospective mentee, when they approach a potential mentor, if they've gone through the program, should ask, what are your values? What are the things that matter most to you? And more importantly, maybe most importantly, the mentee should ask that of him or herself. What things matter to me? What are most important to me? What am I not willing to move on? Right? Okay, I'll give you an example. We've talked a lot about policy designs, like the elephant in the room, right? Everybody wants to talk about policy design, right? What's the premium structure? What are the ratios? The answer is every client's different, right? James and I have a certain way that I approach a given client. You know, I have a starting point, and then we customize, we handcraft, and adjust to the particular individual. Right? But my view with the policy, regardless of the overall design, is I want to give you a policy in which you can pay as much premium for as long as you might want to pay it. Right? That does not mean squishing the base down to nothing so that you have to RPU it in year 10. Right? So that hopefully, over the course of those 10 years, you don't have a major life event so that you're not insurable in year 11. Right? All sorts of things. So because we have that value of how we should approach dividend-paying whole life, it informs the practice. Right? It informs what we do with the given policy. Right? And for a mentee and a mentor working together, if we disagree on that, it's not going to work. Right? It's not going to work because you'd want to, I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but the idea of submission. We should want to submit to a mentor. Right? But in order to do that, we've got to have an understanding of that minimally sufficient shared value set. Next thing that kind of goes with that is the idea of mutual benefit. Do you know it's okay to get paid a commission? Yeah, it's okay. Thank you, Richard. Yes, it is okay to get paid a commission, and it's okay to pay one. Right? Nothing wrong with a split on a given policy. Right? If you need help, that's okay. Right? I believe there is a hint of an anti-capitalist mentality throughout the financial world and sometimes in the IBC world, where we're hesitant to pay a commission. It's okay to have a premium split. And we see this in the client's world too, right? The ones who come in with a sort of a bit of a veiled hostility, right? Look, life insurance agents in general, you know this, don't have a great reputation, right? A lot of it was earned, right? We have to be different. And James says oftentimes, that an individual client coming into a relationship judging you by somebody else's character, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. Because underneath that, there's an unwillingness to engage in mutual benefit. Right? People ask, are you making a commission on this product? Absolutely, I'm making a commission on this product. Do you work for free? Yeah. And look, over the lifetime of that individual, it's going to work out for them, right? They're going to be better off. It's not as though we're getting away with something, right? In economics, they call it the zero-sum fallacy, the idea of a fixed pie, right? That if I win, you must lose, right? If I get a slice, that's one slice less that you could have got, right? It's a zero-sum fallacy, right? It's false thinking, right? When two individuals exchange, the only reason we exchange in the first place is because both parties believe they'll benefit from the exchange. Otherwise, they wouldn't exchange. So it must be the case that there's mutual benefit, mutual value creation, so long as it's voluntary, but we won't get into politics. I don't want to blow too hard on that. This is another thing, too, I hear out there. The idea that we want to have a relational business. We want to build relationships. And that's true, but it's often juxtaposed against the transactional, right? As if the transactional thing is bad. Well, I don't believe it's a dichotomy. I think in order to get to the relational, you need the transactional. I think they really go like this, right? I contract with carriers through James's office. My production contributes to his overall profitability, and I prefer it that way, right? As a mentee, the thing I wouldn't want is a relationship with someone who I know has no stake in my financial future. Why would I want that? So I know that the particular Nelson Nash Institute mentorship program has certain minimum things that they want to make sure are in place. For example, splitting a number of cases that you come to an agreement upon. I don't think that's enough. I don't think he can teach me everything he's learned in 30 years in 6 months. I think that would be presumptive of me. I hope to stick around, God willing. Right? So I think that in order for there to be a successful mentorship arrangement, there needs to be a mutually beneficial transactional basis. It's okay to have a contract. It's okay that somebody else gets paid by your production. Right? I think that's better. I think that's what we should prefer. And so many of you have seen the podcast, so you know that James and I are different, right? He's shorter. Okay. Talks a little slower. I talk a little faster. Right? We're both pretty large personalities, right? My point here is that the ways in which we're different are complementary. The ways in which we're similar, they're reinforcing, right? One example, loyalty. Both very loyal to Nelson and what he represented and what he left all of us, right? That loyalty that we share is mutually reinforcing, right? The way it happens to manifest is in a podcast, right? But, okay, so people think, well, everybody's getting into podcasting. Man, I guess I should get into podcasting. Maybe, maybe not, right? One thing that I don't like from my generation is the pestering of people in older generations to constantly adopt to the new technology of the day, right? It's okay to do business on a notepad. Right? We don't have, just because there's a newfangled ClickFunnels or system or podcasting technology or email advisor chain or whatever it is, doesn't mean we have to jump into it, right? Going back to what I mentioned at the first part of it, I think that in order to be, I'm in my third year, right? So I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I think that if I have had any success, it's because I've been intentional about being reflective about what I want to do, about the business I want to build, about the life I want to lead. Right? And I think if we lose that, then we're sacrificing the potential lifestyle we otherwise could have. That's the idea of mutual benefit. Nelson in his book we're all familiar, The Human Problems, right? And I'm not saying that I want to add to it, but there is, over the last few months, I've noticed that maybe another potential rule, that call it one of my rules, I don't know, but it's the idea of paying your dues. Right? I see this a lot with, I don't spend much time with them, but I see it with some prospects who they don't want to read a book. They don't want to read 92 pages. They don't want to watch the podcast, right? They want you to do it for them. And I'm not interested in that, personally. I know that other advisors, I know that others in the industry have the mentality of we'll be I think I used to work at one of the big four for 2 weeks, and that was it. But they wanted to be the head coach, right? And they were gonna manage this person's financial situation as just like a coach manages a football team. No, thank you. Not for me, right? That's not my lane. For others, that is. And there could be value in that. I don't know. It's not my style, right? My style is building the best possible banking policies that I know how to build. And by the way, I do build them. I understand that learning the software can be cumbersome, and the software is cumbersome. But frankly, a lot of the conventional agents aren't building their own policies. And people don't know that, right? People don't know that they have a policy that contractually would allow them to pay as such and such PUA that would mech the policy, right? Now, that's not illustrated, right? Because you don't want to illustrate a MEC, right? So you'll illustrate a lower PUA, but if you don't pay attention to the PUA, the underwritten level of PUA, then you could build the policy in order that such that the client could then MEC it, right? If you're not paying attention. You don't know what will happen. Maybe they forgot that they wrote that last PUA check. They write another one. Maybe the company's not paying attention. They accept it. Maybe the grace period goes out. Well, now you have a MEC, right? Is it likely to happen? Probably not. Right? But the fact that it could is something that I think we should be aware of. James talked about the 3 levels of knowledge, right? The top one being, you should be able to teach a teacher, right? The idea of mastery. I think if we're going to excel in the business, in the industry, in finance, and pushing IBC out to everybody, then we should aim for that mastery level. And one element of that is making sure that a policy is built so that, to the best of our abilities, we can't lose that preferable tax treatment. And the clients who are unwilling to go through that process, to go through the educational process, the one-on-one interaction, the phone calls, the video calls, who are uncomfortable giving their financial information, right? Come to me when you're ready, right? And the opposite of this, by the way, the positive version of this is just wonderful. People that I've never even spoken to sending me everything. Birth date, social security numbers, financial amounts. I mean, these are people normally who have watched every episode of the podcast, sometimes twice, and they're after maybe a 20-minute phone call, or maybe without even a first phone call, they're sending everything. Get me started. Here's where I am. What do I need to do? Right? That's how that could look, right? With people who are willing to pay their dues. I remember when I first got into the business, I heard the idea of a 12 to 18-month sales cycle. That just has not been my experience. My experience is much shorter. The people that I've been interacting with most have done the work. They've paid their dues. They've went and done the research. And they know, they've vetted, right? And I encourage people, I encourage everybody to do as much research as they feel they need to do. And you can spend as much time doing it as you like. Right? And if you're involved with any other agent's process, my encouragement is to see that through to a satisfactory end. Maybe that means doing business. Maybe it means acquiring a policy. Maybe it means exiting their process. I don't know, right? But the truth is, most often, the people who come to me, they're ready to go. They don't need to investigate or question me or question my character before we get to a policy in force, right? The greatest lag in time in my business is working with the underwriters, right? My gosh, man, issue a policy. It's okay, right? Accept a premium check. Just a little gentle cajoling for my industry friends. Had a great night. I don't know if the Chad's here, if he had to leave, but had a great evening last night with some of the people from Lafayette. That was very cool. I'm also here tonight too. Just side note. So we're not leaving, but if anybody wants to talk further, we can. But last point on paying your dues. Quote generating and selling from an illustration. The last step in my process is an illustration. The last one. And I understand the idea of wanting to see what things look like. I understand the idea of wanting to see the numbers, especially my accountant and analytical type friends. They want to see the numbers. I get that. It's your money. You're buying something you don't understand. What really where that's coming from, then that need to see the numbers, that need to feel out, I believe that's coming from a lack of understanding of the asset. Right? These individuals are learning a new asset. Maybe they've realized that their understanding was based on somebody else's misconception. And so they're willing to take a second look. And what they know to do is to ask to see the numbers to start to feel that out. So I understand it. Right? But I believe that if a transaction is, remember that initial minimum sufficient shared set of values, one of them being able to pay a premium for as long as you might want to pay it, right? So if someone's coming to me to get a policy and they want to pay a substantial premium for decades, and we make the sale 2 hours in based on the numbers that I was able to generate from this illustration with every superscript in the book up on every year, right? With all the variations that you have to make in order to, all the lack of flexibility you must accept in order to get the illustration to be as nice looking as it is, right? And I'm speaking now in terms of things like cash value relative to cumulative premium, that kind of thing, if someone cares about that, right? That's usually how people approach how a policy is performing, right? My view on that is that it's just unhelpful. If you sign on the line, you accept the policy, go to delivery, write the premium check, because of the numbers you saw on the page and not because of the understanding that you developed, then in 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, when it comes time to write that big old check again, it's going to be, wait, why am I doing this? And in fact, can I reverse this? How much could I get to if I wanted to? Call up the agent. Hey, what's my cash value? Oh, $50,000, let's say. Okay, can I get that check, please? Right? Because the point is, an illustration can be a source of clarity if the proper education has been done. If the proper education has not been done, then the illustration is a source of confusion. When I first got into IBC and went through equipment financing, flipping one page to the next, looking at that cumulative net outlay column, third from the right, and seeing those numbers go up all because he changed where his cash flows went, I was like, man, that looks good. Who wouldn't want that, right? My philosophy has really changed on that. I think the numbers are a potential distraction, and often are. There are a lot of things that matter, in my view, for a dividend-paying whole life policy that aren't in the illustration. I have a position on direct recognition versus non-direct recognition. That's not on the page. Nelson, one of the basics that he wanted us to have was to work with companies that have been around for at least 100 years and paid a dividend for every one of those years. That's not on the illustration, right? The relationship the individual agent has with the company, that's not on the illustration, right? There's a whole lot that's not on the illustration. And by the way, the illustration is not a contract. It's numbers on a page that as soon as the calendar page flips, the sun sets and rises the next day, current experience has changed. And so the numbers that obtain will be different than the numbers on the page. Maybe they won't be. Maybe everything stays literally the same forever. And so what's illustrated will be the same, but it's not likely, right? So is that what we're going to use as the basis to make a sale? For me, it's not. Now, once we've had the conversation, I know the individual's read the book, they've gone through the podcast, we've had a few conversations, we've talked about premium, we've talked about the premium level, duration, and the certainty around that duration, which then informs the policy design, right? We've talked about all that. We know what those numbers are. If there's a term writer, they know what that is. They know what base premium is. They know what PUA is. They know what cash value is. They know how to get a policy loan. All of that's in place. Okay, now let's look at it in black and white. And that call's quick. And then we can get excited. We can start comparing the premium payment and pick a year 35, compared to the increase in cash value in that year. Oh my gosh. I ask them, what's wrong with that? Well, nothing, looks great. Like, no, add a zero. Move the decimal place. That's not a that's a $10,000 premium, sure, but why not 100? Right? Help them see bigger. Help them see. I've come to believe that, in now mentoring myself, that really what we do, really what I do, is conveying the value in the contract. Because we can see that, I'm just using round numbers here, that the cash value in year 40 is such and such multiple of the cumulative premium, right? We can see that, and that looks good, right? All built on a guaranteed basis from compounding, affected by two things, time and your behavior, right? Don't care what the Fed does. Don't care if we've seceded yet, right? Don't care if anything else that's going on in the world, right? Time and my behavior. and it's going to cause this dramatic increase in the capital that I have access to. That's great. But what does that number mean? What does that number represent? That number represents the business your son wants to start. That number represents paying for the medical treatment you didn't know he would need. That number represents paying for your husband or wife's surgery that came after a major medical diagnosis. That number is your great-grandchildren's trip around the world before going to college, right? Whatever it might be, that number keeps the farm together after you graduate so that your kids don't have to sell off property, right? That's what that number is. And by the way, none of that is on the illustration, right? It's just a number, right? And I think part of it, and we're talking about the idea of paying your dues, I think part of what we can do to pay our dues is to go as deep as possible to understand as best as possible just what those numbers mean, right? And then to convey that, to convey it to the agents we work with, to convey it to the members of the public that we work with, our clients, right? Because, by the way, once they understand and once they see it, man, I love light bulb moments. You can hear it in their voice. If it's a video call, you can see it on their face. It's like, oh, wow. When do I get started, right? I now don't have to manage that person, right? The way I do business with people is I tell them different kinds of people, different levels of communication. Some of my people I talk to weekly, some people I talk to annually, right? It's all over the map. It's whatever they want. But the nature of those conversations is fully independent. There's no dependency. I will not accept dependency. It's becoming your own banker, right? It's not me becoming your banker for you. It's you becoming your own banker, right? And my job is to empower you to be that. And then go be a bank. Go do whatever you're doing. Man, this ticks me off. Go to a Chamber of Commerce event or see somebody in the conventional financial industry. They'll ask me, what do you do? I tell them, I sell really expensive life insurance. As expensive as possible with as little death benefit as possible to make as much money as possible. Oh, and I tell my clients that too. And they're like, what? And I do that because their thing is, well, what if your client wants to invest? Aren't you in the market? Notice that we've already equated the idea of investing with purchasing stock from the stock market. Big jump there, right? What I encourage people to see, what I want all of my clients to see, is that your highest performing asset in terms of rate of return is you. Even if you did buy that stock and it went through the roof, you did that, right? The only reason you're benefiting from that is because you took action, right? You went and decided to purchase something, and the return benefited you. You could call that the rate of return on whatever the particular stock is, sure, but it imputes to you. Okay, well, the question then becomes, how do we, if it is the case that the individual is their most productive asset, right, their most profitable asset, the question becomes, how then can we optimize that? How can we then best prepare you to go out and to perform as well as possible? And I tell you what, it doesn't hurt to be highly capitalized. Right? I believe the landscape of economic opportunity looks a lot different to somebody walking around knowing they can write a check for however tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars than it does for somebody walking around with $5 in his pocket. Right? In a seminar I talk about in Building Your Warehouse of Wealth, Nelson tells the story of how he lent money to a friend of his. He purchased land from him. The individual underestimated his need for capital. Surprise, surprise. Came back to him, let Nelson buy off the land at a discount. Nelson then turns around a few years later, sells it, and finances it. What's the rate of return on that? Bernie Madoff went to jail forever because he faked 1% a month, 12% a year. 12%? Add some zeros, right? If Nelson wouldn't have been able to have purchased that land had he not had access to a substantial pool of financial value. But because he did and others didn't, opportunity chased him down. Right? He didn't have to contact the advisor, pay a high load in order to buy the next best technology stock. Right? He didn't have to pay those search costs, we call them in economics. Instead, the opportunity came to him. Right? He attracted that opportunity because he had access to capital. And I think that is what can happen for every individual who pays as much premium as they possibly can into a properly structured dividend-paying whole life policy, or policies. Right? What's the best time to get a new policy? It's not year 2. My view, my view is the best time to get a policy is when there's either a rise in income, a decrease in expenses, or both sufficient to justify an expansion of your system. Right? I want to minimize the number of years that the individual is in the highest cost portion of the life cycle of a dividend-paying whole life policy. And I understand that there's a lot of others who don't do that, who believe in the laddering or the stacking or buying multiple, and there could be a place for that. I don't know. It's not what I do. Right? In my view, that keeps, an individual has a fixed number of years to walk this earth, and the more of those years that are spent in the higher cost portion of a particular policy, the more cost they're paying. I can't see a way out of that. I'm willing to be persuaded otherwise, but I can't see how that doesn't mean that the individual is paying greater cost. So pay your dues. Be willing to, my encouragement is to look past the numbers, right? Be willing to split a commission with somebody who can share what they believe is going on in that policy, right? In a way that speaks to you, such that you're able to then take it and share it with somebody else. Right? A willingness to pay your dues. And I believe that if you do business with clients who are unwilling to pay their dues, you are not acquiring a client, you're purchasing a liability. And it will only cost you in the long run in terms of time. And there's nothing wrong with, having a continuing relationship, continuing to help coach and mentor that client, but it should not go into the world of dependency, where because they didn't pay their dues and do the educational work ahead of time, they have to rely on you to manage what they own. I tell people, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, I want you to understand what you own and how to manage it. And the business is not going in force until that's the case. I had a client the other day say, and they had been through the ringer with some other agents, so I understood, but not anybody here. And he said, we kind of want to interview you. And I didn't interrupt him, but I let him finish. And I said, I appreciate that you want to interview me. I just want you to know I'm interviewing you. And I say no to more people than I say yes to. Okay. Turns out he's a very substantial, highly productive member of society, so it doesn't hurt that the premiums will be substantial, but that's good. He'll know how to manage them. All right, last major thing here. The idea of substantial communication. Thorough communication, overwhelming communication. I don't know the right modifier for the word, but a load of communication, right? With Kyle Reese, I told him, listen, every now and then I'm going to hit you with like 25 text messages, and it's just going to rain down on you. And if I don't do it then, I'll lose it and it'll be gone, so it's coming. You don't have to respond right then, but just know that that's how that's how I work, right? With James, we talk. If it's not every day, it's usually every day. If not, it's every other day, right? And we see each other in person often. I believe in order to have a successful mentorship arrangement, either you and your mentee or you and your mentor, there's got to be a lot of communication. I don't know what that looks like in your life. I'm not saying it has to be exactly the way I work with Kyle or the way that I've worked with James. With Nelson, I talk to him on the phone once or twice a month, anywhere from half an hour to an hour and a half. And that was the nature of our communication. right? So it's going to look different for everybody. But I think that substantial communication has to be in place. And one thing that James does particularly well, and that I think most just aren't aware of, is this idea of critical affirmation. Okay? If I tell you, oh, Dale, good job, you did good today. You're welcome. That's useless, right? But if I tell Dale, listen, when you said this, this, and this, in these circumstances, that was good, and this is why. Good job, go do it again, right? It's critical. It's still affirmed, but it's much more specific, right? So I think it's a tactic or something that can be used in your own mentoring relationship. It's the idea of critical affirmation. One of my favorite pictures out by James's pool. You know, I wasn't going to mention that, but you can explain that to Jana later when it's in the recording. I don't think anybody can see it from back there. Huh?
I did.
Yeah.
Let me say, all of y'all did too.
So we have, our mentorship relationship has become, there's other aspects to it. There's a personal relationship, a family-style relationship to it. And I'm not saying that everybody's needs to be that way. I don't think that, frankly, that's possible for everybody to be that way. My point, though, is that it's become this way because we have a minimally sufficient shared set of values. We believe in the idea of mutual benefit. Both of us are willing to pay our dues, and we're willing to communicate. Another one of those elements of communication is I talked earlier about submission, right? Being able to take correction willingly without fighting, right? And wanting that correction, not just, oh, I made the mistake, or I can hide it this time, or I'll fix it before he sees or something. No, it's please check my work and tell me where this is wrong, right? And I think that if you do those four things, if you do pay your dues, you believe in mutual benefit, you believe in the value that you have to bring, right, to showing people what they're buying, what those numbers on the page can mean. I think if you take that understanding and keep it and hold it deep, that you can come to see that the importance of being selective about who you choose to submit to as a mentor or as a model. Right? Nelson was extremely worthy. Right? This was last year. 2 Corinthians 4:18 says, while we look not at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal. The idea of the seen and the unseen became a major theme in Austrian economics. It occurred to me while I was talking about it on a podcast with James that I just heard that in church. That's biblical. And while one individual is no longer seen, what we have to share with everybody else is the eternal unseen. And that's what we have the ability, the opportunity to convey to other people. Bob talked a lot about what he thinks is going to happen in the economy coming up. We're working on a paper that goes even deeper than that and ties in money supply stuff. So there's going to be that. There's going to be the fear and the worry and the concern that comes from the major market correction. But I think regardless of that, the flood is going to come. I think David said the largest attendance since 2012. Bob, you highlighted some of the numbers about the new people who are applying to interview to come be a part of this. And man, I think we're just getting started. You know, so I asked myself, could I handle 5 times as many clients? I don't know. I'm willing to try, though, you know? But I think the flood is coming. And it is all the more critical now, right now, that we develop an understanding of mutual benefit, of having that minimum sufficient shared value set, of being willing to pay our dues, to take correction, to take coaching, to be willing to communicate, take correction, to give critical affirmation, to acknowledge the value of what we can bring, right? Not just a commissioned life insurance agent. Bob mentioned the PhD. People say, well, you know, didn't you want to teach economics? I said, I do. I teach a lot more now than I did in the conventional PhD program, right? That's what we're doing. Yeah, we happen to sell the asset you need, which is okay, by the way. It's okay to sell the thing that you believe in, right? I had to get over that myself, right? But that's the position that we're in, and I think the flood's coming, and it's time to build the ark. Because it's going to come whether we like it or not. And if the systems and the processes and underneath all that, the relationships aren't there so that you can handle that coming flood, then I think some could drown, and I don't want to see that. So get to work. Thank you.